Yeah, I'm sitting down tonight, by the way. We're just having an informal parlay. So I wasn't feeling well and decided to sit and just talk to everybody tonight. The most important thing that people can do is contact the government in advance of any problems and let them know that you're actually the one piloting the ship. This is my deal. This is my vessel, the whole 9 yards. We were just talking about this off camera, and obviously if you want to contact the government with any kind of an agreement, you're going to want to contact the head of the legal department. Every corporation has one. With a province, it's the Attorney General. See, that's where people should have been sending their NUI cores, their understandings of intent, whatever they're going to send, a fee schedule. It goes to the Attorney General because he's head of the law department. He's the minister responsible for all the other lawyers that work for the province. So he'd be the top guy to contact. And then we got off topic on that as well again about how at the top of your document you're going to want to put on there certain things like every word in this document can be found in Black's Law Dictionary, because those are the meanings of the terms that I'm using. So when I'm dealing with you people, I'm only using the terms, the definitions of the words that are in Black's Law Dictionary. If you guys don't like that, then you're welcome to get back to me and say, no, we use the definitions of the words that are in the Interpretation Act of Canada. And you say, well, no, I'm sorry, I have to go by that. That's your act. I guess there's no agreement here. We sounds like we just really should be doing business with one another. So fuck you. Don't do business with me. And that's great. And that's where we got into the topic just a few minutes ago about it's great if the government doesn't want to do business with you no more. Because what I just said a few minutes ago was we can always go do other things. I can go grow food. I can go work. I can do anything. I can do all the things I normally do without interference from them. Government is the one that is fucked without us. They're just a bunch of assholes in suits in a building that don't produce anything. They require us to contract with them to make money, to gain a livelihood, to do anything. And they're all just agents of the banks anyways, right? So all these people that produce nothing but paperwork, they need us. We don't need them. That's the position of strength we come in commerce. Because we'll just go do something else and still be productive. And they're still doing nothing productive. And we'll see how long they can eat paper. So that's what I mentioned, because I got one accomplice on the other side of the country here, and he's real big on the Bible stuff, and that's why I know that's where the story of Abel and Cain comes in, where as soon as the ground wouldn't produce for Cain any longer, first thing he did is went and built a city, so he could get the rest of us suckers to do all his work for him. Right? That's exactly what's going on. Period. So, and actually on that, one of the things I realized last time, or even recently after seeing a lot of the comments online, is that I can draw as many things as I want on the board and try to address specific things. But people really they're still not understanding what's going on. I think I had one question online there that somebody was like, you guys have it pretty good in Canada and this and that. I don't see what point you're trying to make. And it's like, what point? I'm like, oh, okay, because I'm being beaten less than that guy, I should be thankful for what I've got kind of idea. And I was like, well, no. And so that kind of led me to believe that maybe people just don't really understand what our motivation is, and even a lot of the people here and that watch the stuff online, they don't know what their own motivation for doing something is. You won't do anything unless you want something out of what you're doing. The end result, what is it you're going to be striving to do, right? A lot of us just want to be left alone, right? Obviously, we still want things like health care. I want to know when I go to the hospital I can get stitched up because, obviously I've required those services in the past. Very, very, very minor government services. Roads, but we pay for those with gasoline taxes. So really the question comes down, what do you want out of all this? But that's the question everybody asks themselves, by the way, too. Is what's the end result of where you want to go? Do you want to be just somebody who lives in a house out in an acreage with solar panels and you just don't look at other human beings? No, that's not my goal. Yeah, it is for a few people. Or just the life we all have in a city right now, just without the controls of government. And people don't understand that, you can give a human being everything they need. You can give them food, you can give them air, everything they need to actually just to live. But the less control somebody has over their own life, that's what makes people act out. It's like the experiments they used to do with mice, when they put mice in cages and they give them everything the mouse needs. But the ability, every time they took the ability of the mouse to control anything that was going on in its environment away, that's when it became angry and struck out, even though it's getting all the food it needs, it's not going to die, right? And then, you know, that's kind of what's happening to us right now. Is the government saying, oh, hey, you don't know, no, you don't have to worry about anything. We'll always make sure you got a roof over your head, you know, even if it's just a tent down at the shelter, and you'll always get some food, some gruel from our stoves. And all you got to do is work and give us all your money. You know, and then the odd time they lift up the mouse cage and they just poke you for no reason. That's the cops doing that. They'll just open it up and say, oh, look at that little fucking thing. Just give you a couple pokes and throw you in jail, right? It's not enough just to be alive. So my short answer to one of the responses I got online is, what do you hope to gain out of this? It's not enough just to be alive. So I don't want to be just a food-consuming device that has no control over my own life, period. So that's my motivation. Everybody else can figure out what theirs is. Nobody's reading. I talked about this in another video. I went back through some of my files from over the years, just the stuff that I started with, and I went through, and I keep everything. I'm a paperwork hoarder. I even kept, I think I told you guys, I took notes and I wrote stuff while I was in prison the last time. I kept all those, and I had a little title page, notes from prison. So I've got everything I wrote last time I was in jail. So I like proving things that I say when I'm online too, by the way, here too. So some of the notes I started taking about all the stuff I was going to do in court and letters I was going to write while I was in jail is on the back of a Winnipeg remand requisition form. So, I think I told people that. I was getting the requisition forms and I would just get a little pencil and I would start writing all my shit in the back of it while I was in jail. So I kept all that and I got pages of it because you got nothing else to do while you're in there. That's probably what's the creditors of Gordon Hall. That's probably why Gordon Hall got so smart. You think he spent, 9 years in jail, writing on the back of requisition forms and figuring out what he did wrong? So I guess he must have got
that guy.
Yeah, I guess he must have got it right, finally. Okay, so I got all that kind of stuff. But anyways, somebody else sent me a panicked message telling me that they went to go find the Constitution Act, or the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And that, like, in section 52 and 32 were gone. Like, they're trying to cover this up all of a sudden. I don't know, what the hell? So I went and looked it up. I got my copy from years and years and years ago that I printed up. And I went and looked it up, the one on Canley, just, okay, they're still the same. They can't change the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to try to hide stuff. Section 32 and section 52 are there for everybody to read. I've brought these up before in previous videos.
I looked at one copy online.
Yeah.
Those sections are missing.
Okay, that's interesting. Did you go to Canley? Somebody said that those sections are missing.
Site.
Okay, well, anyways, the copy that I've got under section 32 says this charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respect of all matters within the authority of Parliament, including all matters related to the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories, and to the legislature and government of each province in respect of all matters within the authority of the legislature of each province. Okay, well, that's not rocket science. It says this charter applies to anything that the government's got authority over, which is their own business. Okay? Well, that was section 32. Then we skip real quick. By the way, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms ends at 32. And there's a reason for that. Because it's part of a bigger act called the Constitution Act. This is for Canada, for all you people out there. The Constitution Act was actually passed in the UK. It was called the Canada Act. And section 52, where it goes on, if you have the full act, goes on to say that the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect. Okay, so what that tells you, this is the supreme law, period. And the supreme law, period, just told you in section 32 that it only applies to government. So you don't really need to go much beyond this act right here. Download a copy and read it. It's 9 minutes of an episode of Friends. If you've watched an episode of Friends and you haven't read the Constitution Act, don't ever message me online bitching about anything. It's right here. Read it. Because I think one of the rants we got here that I read just before class actually was somebody saying that it went off on a deluge of things about, I don't even know what. And they're quoting all sorts of parts of acts and everything. That's great. Somebody's actually read through this stuff. But the point they should have got was that none of this stuff applies to us. Right? An act only applies to you if you contracted with the government through that act. And nothing in the Criminal Code of Canada applies if it doesn't have an act to give it force and effect in the first place. So that's what a little reading will tell you. So beyond that, I just want to spend time reading a couple of things that I know I've brought up in past classes here. Things like, well, I've said before, and this is one of the premises for saying, well, can you prove I perform the function of government, and why this argument is so important. Because you go to a little thing called the Canada Evidence Act, right? And unless you've read this, you should not be going to court as well, period. It's called the Canada Evidence Act. What is evidence? That's kind of important if someone's bringing a charge against you and you want to play in their game. So you read through the Evidence Act, and most of it's nonsense and just common sense. If you're an employee of a corporation, that's a good guideline. But then you go into the definitions section here, section 12, and you look up the word business. And I think I've touched on this before. So the government of Canada obviously has authority over its own business, or over, they just say just business, period, right? Oh, it has, over commerce. We got jurisdiction over commerce, right? Well, in business, it's the same thing. So it's their business. The definition of business in their own act, look it up, Canada Evidence Act, definition of business. It's really easy to find. None of the stuff's hidden. Business means any business, profession, trade, calling, manufacture, or undertaking of any kind carried on in Canada or elsewhere, whether for profit or otherwise, including any activity or operation carried out on or performed in Canada or elsewhere by any government, by any department, by blah, 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 goes on. And then it finishes off in an interesting way. It finishes by saying performing a function of government. So that's their definition of business. So anything that they have authority over, anything that they're conducting business as, is something performing a function of government, and that's just right in their own act.
That was the Interpretation Act?
No, this is the Canada Evidence Act.
Okay.
The Interpretation Act is another one altogether, and I've got that here because years ago I went through and I read through every single one of their acts. I read everything. I read them over again. I read the Criminal Code 3 times. And it was then that I realized that it's irrelevant. It's nonsense. Even if it is the laws my adversaries are using, they're not my adversary. I don't want to fight them. I may want to do business with them in certain capacities, and I may not want to do business with them, right? But it's pointless to learn all their shit, because it's just that. It's their shit. And it even says in their own acts, it's their own shit. Period. It only applies to you if you decide to perform a function of government, to contract with them, to be paid, to receive remuneration for doing a service of government. And that means if there was a gravel company out there called Canada, and they had this wonderful little charter and all these laws and a criminal code of Canada for that gravel company, for all the employees that work there, and you just owned your own truck and you were out in the highways one day and they pulled you over, okay, well, unless you're hauling gravel for them, none of their shit applies to you. Period. But if you've got Canada Gravel Company on the side of your truck and you're hauling a load for them and you're breaching one of their mandates of their corporation, then you're going to summary convictions court. The problem is the government has spent a lot of years, a lot of money on a bullshit education. Sorry, schooling. It's not an education, it's schooling. Fish school, you're all taught the same way, to think the same way, to swim the same way, everything the same way, and to be as dumb as humanly possible. We've been led to believe that everything that's commerce is the government. Like, we can't even conduct commerce without the government involved in our lives, and that's just horseshit. So, the Interpretation Act, there's so many things in the Interpretation Act, and again, if people haven't read this, if you want to know what Canada is even, well, it's in the Interpretation Act. It's very simple. In fact, there's one line under general definitions for Canada, for greater clarity, for greater certainty, includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial sea of Canada. There's even old maps that still exist for Canada where it's just got the highlighted areas of some of the internal waterways and the territorial seas. That is all Canada is. It's not a landmass. It's not a country. It's a nation, right? It's it right here in their own definitions. So when people say, oh, that just means it includes, like as in on top of all the land. Well, then just go look up the definition of the word includes in Black's Law Dictionary. It'll tell you the word includes is an exclusionary term, right? The inclusion of one is the exclusion of all others. It's like me saying the basket contains apples of the green variety. It means the basket only has green apples. Period. Anything that follows includes is all that is in there. Period.
Would that also mean, sorry, I don't mean to talk out of range, would that also mean that the basket itself was made out of green apples, or?
I have no idea. The question was, does that mean the basket itself is made out of green apples? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that that Canada's the basket and the apples are what.
Okay.
If that makes
It's
sense.
the body corporate.
Sure, let's call it that. There you go. The body corporate is the basket. That actually is a body that contains something, is it not? By definition. So definitions are fun. People should read them and learn them. So just go through the Interpretation Act. There's all sorts of fun things in here. If you really want to go into Caesar's court, into the summary convictions, especially without knowing what you're doing, I know people are getting really fired up online, like, oh, fuck yeah, man, I'm going to go into that court and I'm going to hand them their asses. You're not. Okay, that's the scam. You're not going to hand them their asses in their own courts. They may shy away from you and decide not to be as public about what they're doing. You're not going to hand them their own asses. That's you're best just staying out of there altogether, and that's the only way to win that game is to stay out of it. And if that takes a little reading to understand how and why you can stay out of it, then that's great. I mean, I even found one of my own. I was going to do my own notice of understanding and intent and claim of right kind of thing back in the day, and shit, I got like this big thing ready years ago, and that was when I read through it, and I'm like, this is kind of stupid. How do I contact them and ask them what they're claiming I can't do? And that's where that theory came from. So, I don't know. There's also, you know what, another thing people should learn is like maxims of law. Instead of me just up here on a board trying to teach people things, just download the maxims of law and read them. They're in Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Read the maxims of law.
Do you know where the origins of the maxims of law come from? Like
They're another one of those things that I think the actual definition of the maxims of law they're well-established facts. They're just facts that are so old and well-established that you just don't even need to write them anymore. They're like self-evident truths, is what a maxim of law is.
Except they're not universally applicable.
I wouldn't say they're universally applicable, no. But if you decide that that applies to you, and somebody else believes that it doesn't, well, I guess you don't have agreement.
Well, in particular, I think
That's
the
great.
old one, he who does not deny admits.
Yeah.
That works for merchants having a dispute,
Yeah, it's merchant law.
but it's not really.
Yeah, and that's great though,
natural
because
law.
no, it's not natural law, but sorry, that was the question. Is it like he who does not deny admits would probably only apply in merchant law, and that's correct, and that's great because that's all government is, right? They're operating in merchant law, period. So that's why I say when you contact government and you start sending in these fee schedules and these notices and they don't reply at all, that's great. They're just agreeing with you, right? Well, that's perfect. If the government agrees with you, now when they try to charge you in summary convictions court and you just send the Crown a copy of your agreement you already have with the Attorney General, says, no, you guys already agreed with me that this doesn't apply. Well, what case do they have now, right? And then when that Crown doesn't reply to you, he's now agreed as well. So then you send all of that down to the courts building, and if they're giving you hassle down at the courts building, and you walk up to the window and they're saying, no, you can't put that in the court file, which is horseshit because that's the only place affidavits do go is in the court file. You ask them some questions about, is this not a public building? Is this not a public courthouse? Is that not a public court file? Are you not a public servant? Your job is not to tell me what does not go in a court file. Your job is to put what I'm giving you into a court file. If that doesn't work, then we got to get into some of the administrative remedies later on. Today was just kind of going to be my chat day because I just felt like sitting down and going over some very rough principles here that people seem to still be missing. So anyways, maxims of law. There's plenty of them online you can download. This is one of the first ones I printed up years ago, I think. It's 15 pages. It's got about every maxim of law in the most simple form you can possibly find. I went through and highlighted a bunch back in the day, ones I thought were really nice, like no one can give what he does not own, ignorance of the law excuses no one. I went through here and I just highlighted a bunch of ones that I liked, right? And so I would start including those at the top of some of my fee schedules and stuff like that I would send off to the government. Here's a great one, consent and contracts. Well, if this is all contract law, every single one of these maxims would be a good one to know. The one I've got highlighted is the contract makes the law. Law is contract, period, because there's only two forms of law. We've covered that. There's man-made law and there's God's law. Man-made law is merchant law. It's any law. It's if you and I come to an agreement right now about anything, that's law between us, between the parties. So the contract makes the law between the parties. If I'm not a party to a contract, that doesn't apply to me. That's the basis for the free man movement as far as I'm concerned. What is that? 5 words, and that sums up everything we're trying to do out here. So when the Crown's taking you to summary convictions court, and you're waiting until the day of court to go in there, and you're going to hand these guys their asses by telling them that you show me the contract. Well, no, it doesn't really contact the Crown in advance. And I love it when people now go, and I tell everybody to do this, go to the first hearing and get your full disclosure, because in there is all the evidence you need to go after them. All the police reports, everything that they wrote down about you, them confessing that they pulled you over on the highway and beat you, and whatever they did to you, they confessed to everything in the full disclosure. That is great. Thank you. You'll be hearing from me in the next couple of weeks. Oh, well, how about a hearing date in 3-4 weeks? I'm sure that sounds good, but no, you'll probably get a letter from me in a couple of days. That's when you send them a demand to provide a contract. What contract were you enforcing at the time I was pulled over and detained and beaten and my human rights were violated? Well, they don't reply. When they don't reply, what do they just admit? They must not have a contract. Right? And what is the law? Well, the contract makes the law. Exactly. So, there you go. Put that right at the top of your letter when you're contacting the Crown. The contract makes the law, right? Put little quotation marks around it and put legal maxim beside that. I don't care. Get creative. Just contact these guys in advance and do stuff like this and read. These are maxims of law. It's 15 pages. Again, there's the other 7 minutes of an episode of Friends. Download it and read it. Right? In one episode of Friends, you could dismantle the entire Canadian law system. So how many people have watched 100 episodes of Friends out there and then bitch that their rights got violated when they went to court? So it's kind of annoying stuff, and I just don't mind speaking my mind about that.
How about commercial maxims?
Commercial maxims? Well, actually, interestingly enough, there are they're actually called maxims of equity, and those you can download as well. I think a lot of these kind of mix back and forth. I mean, obviously that maxim of law was very relevant to merchant law. But there is maxims of equity as well. And the reason you're going to want to know maxims of equity is because that's where your recourse is. So if you start contacting people with legal documents you're drafting yourselves, and you start quoting maxims of equity in there about who has equitable claim to something for what reason, that's going to have some standing now, especially when you start going into civil court. I'm going to stop calling it Queen's Bench because we got people from all over the world that have different court systems that are watching some of this stuff now. Civil court. Anywhere where you enforce a contract is civil court. Wherever you sue somebody, wherever one real injured party is suing another injured party, that's the court you want to take them to. And I don't care if it's Australia or the United Kingdom or Canada, the United States, just sue the government, just sue them. Right? We're having some interesting results with that. So I'm not going to get into a lot of that yet, but I will again state for the record, unequivocally, the government never replies to these. Never. They will get their lawyers to try every scam and procedure that they can find. And if you don't know how to control the judge a little bit by, number one, not allowing a Crown to testify, because we have Crowns now, our attorneys, lawyers for the government, who are filing motions that, to the best of our knowledge, we've never seen a signed copy of one of these motions. So they're not even signing the motions. The motions have no statement of defense. They have no claim other than trying to claim that you aren't following proper procedure in some way. So they're not attacking the substance of your claim. They're just going after procedure. And that looks really bad for them because the fact they're not filing a statement of defense, as far as I'm concerned, is it's an abusive process. It's frivolous filings. You're attacking my form over my substance. And I think you have standing over that anyways. So that's why you should learn, again, wherever you live, go and read the court rules. They have rules there. I think there's 65 different forms. Only 20 are going to apply to anything you're ever going to be doing in the court because most of them get into probate court and estates and all this other nonsense you're never going to be dealing with. So there's 20 forms to follow. So So you have a cover letter and then a form that follows it, probably with your affidavit, and then exhibits you enter. And it's the simplest thing in the world to get a lawsuit together. I can't believe people even hire lawyers once you read how to do it. It's insane. So do that. Just read it, and it's all right here. And quote maxims of law and where you got them from. Get them from Bouvier's Law Dictionary online. Is a court going to tell you that Bouvier's Law Dictionary is not a good legal source? I don't think so. Is the government going to come up with a better one, maybe? Like maybe an agreement of the parties? No. Are they even going to rebut anything you enter into the court file? No. They're going to commit an abusive process. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the things we're working on right now is the 2 lawyers involved in doing some of the shenanigans we're doing right now in court for one of our claims. I honestly think that we should be filing separate charges against those lawyers, against their license to practice, for abusive process and frivolous filing. Just so that these people start to know that when they defend government with these frivolous filings, that we're going to go after their bar license now. They're no longer removed from liability. Again, because the government may have told them, oh yeah, no worries, we'll assume liability for you if you go ahead and do this. No, dude. It's impossible to assume liability for somebody else. There's no such thing. So, that's all. I don't know. We can get into anything else there. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. I was going to cut it short tonight, and then I was going to have a parlay maybe with a couple of people online here to see maybe what actual topic we should maybe schedule a whole hour-long thing about, where I get a plan together and actually detail some things for people, some learning, without getting into too much detail, because the whole problem is you can't explain it. I mean, you go to high school for 3 or 4 years to get a degree. Is it possible for my friend to come up to me and say, hey, Dean, you went to school for 4 years. Why don't you just summarize it for me in a paragraph, and I'll go down there and give them that and tell them to give me a university or a high school degree. Okay, it's not going to happen. It's the whole experience was the high school degree, going through it and doing the whole experience and learning and the process involved. So it's not just like you can just be shown something and, oh, okay, not a problem, and then go do it and expect to understand it and have it work. So we will start to set up some of the workshops, and again, we're still going to stick to basics, because a lot of the feedback I'm getting, people still don't understand a lot of even the basic concepts of what their human rights are. So we'll get into all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Any questions for tonight, though?
It seems like that's like what you were just talking about. There seems to be the main issue. Like I know there's a lot of different courses that are out there. People pay $200 or $2,000 or much more to take various law courses.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what we need to produce is like an ABC course, or like an intro course, and then maybe some middle of the road course and some advanced course. I don't know, but you catch my drift.
Yeah, I agree with that, and courses is a good thing.
Like how far you take it, of course, is another thing.
That's the thing.
Right on the heels of that.
Okay.
Who are your influences and what do you take inspiration from?
Okay, so the first one is courses, and the second one is who my influences are? Okay.
To follow along the same lines, if you're...
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I think I'm on the same path as a lot of people on the internet that have seen a lot of different theories and beliefs and have tried most of them, and nothing really works, and then you like, like I remember the years and years ago now, even way back in the day. I mean, some of my first experiences with stuff online was some of the accepted for value stuff. And I think in the beginning that all ended up coming originally from somebody. Accepted for value, I think, is a theory that came off the heels of some other stuff, redemption and stuff like that Roger Elvick was doing way back in the day. So that was some of my first run-ins with that type of stuff. But then when I wanted, it's like, okay, well, why does that work? Like, people shouldn't expect us to write something on a piece of paper and send the bill back and oh, those bastards, I wrote accepted for value on it. They didn't do anything. It's, well, okay, well, did you understand why you did that? Right? Can you raise that argument if you were to contact them and say, hey, I wrote AFB on that. How come you didn't zero out the accounts? And they're just going to say, well, what made you think it would? That's the only argument. They got to come back with you, and then you're just going to go, well, because somebody online told me to do that, right? That's the only thing you can possibly come up with. Whereas if you read the Bill of Exchange Act, which I have again, you'd understand in about an hour, and why that process is not necessary. And that's a simple one. I can explain that to you in about 2.5 minutes. But why would I? Go read the friggin' act. It's there. What's your take on it? My take on things is not always what everybody else's take is going to be on things. That's why I always like people to do that. Then people come back to me and say, hey, when I read that, I thought of this. And I'll go, shit, yeah, I kind of like the sound of that. You know? And then we get new ideas. So quit taking everybody's word at face value. Like, go read the stuff. I got no problem pointing everybody in the right direction, but then you gotta do a little bit of running yourself there, period. Right? I'm not gonna pick everybody up and drop them off at the end of the marathon.
I have to confess.
Yeah.
I'm a chiropractor 12 years.
Yeah.
What I did today for 2 hours, for the first time, at the bottom is read the Chiropractic Act.
Really?
Nice.
I'm confessing my hypocrisy, right? Because this is it's so inherent with all of us and everything we do.
Confess your sins, my son. I'm all ears.
We've been bred not to know.
I like that we've been bred just we want the simple, easy solution. We don't want to just read an act, you know, that's sitting right there in front of us anyways. And even if it, you know, even if your argument is, well, it doesn't apply to me, well, you should be able to prove maybe in your own acts where it actually says it doesn't apply to you. So,
Yeah, thanks to your lectures, a lot of people have been joining the site lately. I've been talking to a few of them lately. And the most common question I get, and this is, I know, probably a hard one to answer because everybody's different, everybody has their own goals. The most common question is, where do I start?
where do I start? Well, I mean, you started now. People back in the day, I mean, when I first heard about being like a sovereign or a free man, I was like, oh, wow, like, well, how do I become a free man? It's like, well, the minute you state you are. I mean, that's something up here. That comes down to, what is that? There's the three, when you're redeemed, and it talks about that in the Bible too, when you're redeemed the first time in the spirit and the second time in the body. And I gotta say, it's actually, that's something I just recently kind of, see, these are all just my own theories I came up with, and I think about it when I went back 10 years ago, when my spiritual awakening happened. And you'll know when it happens because you get like this kind of, I call them epiphanies. You get like this euphoric feeling where you just go, holy shit, I don't believe it. And you get, seriously, you get a tingling up your arms, your hairs will stand up and you just go, fuck. And that's the start of your spiritual awakening. And a couple of years after that, you'll notice your body actually wants to start fighting you on that. Your body's like, no, we really like what's going on here kind of thing, eh? Like your body's almost got a mind of its own. It likes the fact that we got beat an awful lot less physically when you didn't start doing this kind of shit. So we really don't like what you're doing. You actually start to have a fight with your body. It's the weirdest thing. You'd think that, well, no, your mind is your body. Well, no, obviously it's not because it even says it's not in most religious texts, right? So then you start to have the battle between mind and body where you have to smarten your body up and say, no, dude, we're in this together. And then you win that battle, and that's, I think, when you start to ultimately lose the fear. So when you win I think that has some real, so that's where it all comes from. We'll get back to that point. That's your path. Your path is, number one, your spiritual awakening, and then number two, your earthly awakening, your earthly body, if you want to call it that, your the victory of your mind over body, where your body stops rebelling against you because your body is scared that you're going to get beaten or killed or starved or something based on what this guy's doing, who ultimately is probably going to live forever anyways, right? So I guess if that's a weird and cryptic way of putting it, but your path starts the minute you got that seed in your brain. That's why I love that movie Inception, right? As soon as that seed is there, you know you're on the path of being a sovereign or free man. A sovereign or free man is whatever you say you are. It's not like, okay, here's this definition of sovereign. I just did that today. Okay, that's good.
It's like when you find your courage.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and even once that battle's over, I mean, it's not like that means you're sovereign. It's just the sovereign's a word for something that we all are always striving for throughout our lives. It's just free, to be free, to not be under the authority of another, to be sui juris. So.
Okay, I've been administrating this WFS for about 2 years now.
Okay.
And I've been approached by people who are calling this a mind virus.
Oh, I like that, a mind virus.
What's your opinion on?
Okay.
Because after you get the thought, the inception in your brain, there's no turning back. And the woman in the movie actually jumped off the building in real life because she didn't think that it was real.
Yeah, and that's actually that is a valid point because the problem is for a lot of us especially, is once you have this awakening, you couldn't go back to being normal no matter what. Anyways, it is a virus. It takes over. Absolutely, it takes over. There's no question about that. The idea of freedom, and once the mouse realizes there's something outside of the cage, you'll never be happy being back in the cage.
Yeah, I think it depends on your metaphor for the virus. Viruses can be good or negative.
Yeah. So yeah, some people call it mind virus. I like calling it a seed, because a seed is what gives rise to life, obviously, right? So once that germinates and starts to take hold and everything grows in your head, and it does, your understanding grows more and more all the time. It's not. That's why I try to tell people, you got to read this stuff and you got to get your own mind around it. You actually just can't be told. You have to learn it and understand it, and that only happens in your own head after years of it's a road, it's a path. There's no other way to explain it. There's no
awakening.
It is. It's an awakening, and you're always awakening more. I don't think your mind ever stops expanding once the idea is opened and you start. I mean, people are always asking me, like, where are you coming up with this shit, or where are you reading this online? It's like, I'm not. I've read it. I've done it. Now at this point, it's just this, taking all the information I've read over the years and the experience, and just making my own shit up. And that's what sovereign and free men do, right? When you start writing your laws, living your life, and dictating how your life is going to go, that's what a free man and a sovereign is.
Amen.
So, yeah. Okay. So I wouldn't say virus. That's probably somebody's. Yeah.
Well, just as humans are a virus on the earth, or even trees and plant life are a virus on the earth.
Only certain people are viruses on the earth.
Well, we're not talking about internet trolls.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah. I would say what's a virus by definition? It kind of consumes without
Consumes itself.
Well, it consumes, but without producing anything of value for the organism that it lives off.
Right.
Right.
The organism's forced to evolve around the virus.
Yeah, there you go. So it's not like it's a symbiotic organism. We both get something off one another. Because I still wouldn't even call government that, because everything the government provides for us, we gave to it, and we can live just fine without it altogether. Period. It's not like we're going to die tomorrow if government disappeared or went away. And that's not saying I even say they should disappear or go away. Just if they did what they originally created, what we originally created them to do.
To protect the people instead of the corporations.
They're supposed to be protecting us from these corporations, but now they're kind of enforcing corporate law against us. So we got to take that power back, and I think that's what we touched about earlier on there with what is our true power.
Yeah, I think it's probably more correct to call what we call government the government agency, because we are the government.
That's correct. We are the government, so government agents. Yeah.
Government agency is what we call government.
And people always say, I get some questions about that. Well, what do you mean we are the government? It's like, well, technically, it's the same way as saying when, and I've heard this argument used, when I remember there was a story about a fellow who was going to court because he didn't have a fishing license or whatever. It was a fishing license, and he went to court, and he said, and the government said, the Crown said, well, you didn't have a license or whatever, and the guy said, well, who do the lakes and the fish belong to? And it doesn't matter whether it was the judge or the Crown said, well, it belongs to the people, kind of thing, right? And he said, well, if it belongs to, I'm probably missing part of the story, but either way, it came down to, well, if it belongs to the people, and I'm one of the people, then why do I need a license to be, and then bam, case dismissed. This is a simple argument, very simple argument, and it's completely correct, because, well, it belongs to the government. And then he said, well, who's the government? Is the government not the people? And I said, well, yes, of course the government's the people. So that was the end of that court case. And it's the same idea. And it's the same concept of, that's actually something I want to talk about tonight too, is we're having more of a philosophical, kind of theological thing today here. But just because of all the stuff that's going on in the UK right now, and all these debts and the stock market tanking, everybody is just going crazy about all this shit that's irrelevant that's happening out there. All these debts and austerity, and the U.S. government is spending trillions, and they owe trillions upon trillions. The Canadian government's in debt $2 trillion, and the province of Manitoba is in debt $17.8 billion, literally $17.87 something billion. I hope to add a few to that. Every nation on this planet is in debt, all these trillions of dollars. Okay, except two. So who the fuck do they owe it all to? Is there like this creditor country out there? Like even China owes money to people. Right?
But who is it? Iceland and
Iran and North Korea are the only ones.
Yeah.
that's right, and they don't bill us under our bank.
Yeah, and I think up until recently it would have been Lebanon as well. So either way, if all these countries are in all this massive debt, how could they be? Who's it owed to?
It's all about the IMF and the IMF.
It's all owed to the people.
Yes. Yes. The debt is my share. The debt is canceled. Because we owe it to ourselves.
The debt's all owed to us.
And Iceland has done it.
There you go.
Iceland went through it and it took that exactly.
So that's what I mean. So if the government's trying to say to you, well, you have to pay all these taxes and pay all this money to the government because the government owes all this money. Well, here's a simple argument that I haven't heard anybody ever make, and I haven't had a chance to make it yet. And I made a kind of argument like that just on something else I'm doing that I won't get into right now. But you could just easily say, well, I'll tell you what, if you have to collect money off me so that the government has money so it can afford to pay off all these debts that are owed to the people, and I'm one of the people, how about I just forgive all the debts you owe me instead? Here, I'll sign a liability waiver. Send a liability waiver into the government. You don't owe me any money anymore. So quit fucking asking me for anything. Quit collecting from me to pay me. But I actually wouldn't do that. I like the fact they owe me money.
Yeah, it's nice to be a creditor.
Yeah, you're a creditor. I think it's even better to say, well, you're not getting the money to pay me from me. So you better get a fucking tool belt. Or get a dishcloth. You're going to be working a long fucking time to pay this one off. Right? Take that position with them. Make that argument in court, though. Say, well, if you're collecting taxes off me to pay off this debt that's owed to the people, and I'm one of the people, then is that even lawful to collect, to get me to pay a debt you owe to me? Well, no, of course it's not even lawful. Are they going to make that argument? You're probably never going to court again, ever, with Revenue Canada. You just said, how simple was that?
Yeah.
It's simple. It's simple. Don't I have to walk into, we were just talking about that before class too, about like all the ecclesiastical deed polls and the 3 alleged levels of jurisdiction in the court when you walk in there. Am I seriously going to make any of these arguments in court when the judge comes back after the 3rd time? Am I actually going to accuse the judge of being an agent of Satan coming back in their 3rd capacity kind of thing? And no, like seriously, you're going off for a psych evaluation at that point. But these are all simple arguments that once you understand, I mean, like I say, I could answer everybody's questions in the world, well, if I had enough time. But you can come up with your own answers when you read this stuff. And that's all you have to do is ask yourself simple questions like, well, if every government owes money, who do they owe it to? The only answer could be the people. That's all that's left. We're the ones that they're actually generating all the money, the money from. So if they owe money, it's to us. Right? So once you come to that conclusion, it's like, well then, how is it legal or lawful for them to collect money off me to pay that debt? Then they're just collecting off of me to pay me and taking a cut for doing it. Well, that's the biggest fucking scam the world's ever known. So guess what? Maybe that should be in the form of an affidavit and put in your court file against CRA. Have them rebut that one. I'd love to see it. If somebody does that and they get a reply, I would love to see that one. Instead of making the name argument. Sorry, my throat's a little sore. I wasn't feeling well today, so I'm just making sounds that sound like words, but they're not. Okay, so there's that one while we're off ranting about certain things. Any other questions? Anybody else, like a common theme that seems to be coming up online that people are confused about?
People are overjoyed with your videos. They're like, I've never heard somebody explain it so well.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the reason for the mind virus being that people don't want their government to go to war with other countries for nefarious reasons? Like if we need oil.
So the basket includes why that process works. Okay, so
is this a very good reason for following the free man movement?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so the question was, if the camera would pick it up, is the free man movement, or is one of a good reason for the free man movement the fact that we don't want our governments walking into foreign nations and murdering countless millions of people for no reason, just to steal their resources. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's one good reason. One good reason. Hundreds of thousands of tons or hundreds of millions of tons of depleted uranium being thrown around the fucking world. What is it? The birth defect rate now in like Fallujah and places like that in Iraq is what, like 50? They told people to stop having kids because they're all so mutated. That's going to be our legacy because we couldn't stand up and tell our own government to go fuck itself? Are you kidding me? No, not my name, dude. Seriously. Even if I did have a problem with these people, I wouldn't be doing shit like that. If I have a problem with somebody, I'll go fight them myself. I'm not going to send my government in somewhere and murder millions of people and murder billions more in birth defects and fucking shitty things to come for the next 100 million years.
Well, free men don't need to be handled or moderated or mediated between their adversaries.
That actually, it's actually comical. Not comical. It seems to be, Joe get a kick out of this. It seems to be the way that things go. I was just about to start talking about something. I want to talk about something tonight, and that was the topic that brought it up. Which is great. So where was I going with that? Yeah, from a philosophical standpoint, we all have to live here. Grievances aside, any problems we have with other nations, the whole 9 yards, we all have to live here. And our governments are really, really fucking this planet up for not even generations to come. Like kind of like world killing kind of stuff. Like the Fukushima shit, where you got thousands of times the radiation coming out of that thing that ever came out of Chernobyl. They've done nothing about it. All they did was take it out off the internet and stop talking about it on the news.
Yeah, try not to talk.
Thanks, government. You guys really are fucking handy, aren't you? We got one of the biggest natural disasters that has ever happened on this planet, and hopefully ever does. And it takes a back seat to what happened on the Dow Jones Industrial Average yesterday.
Or Amy Winehouse.
Yeah, like stuff, just stupid fucking crap that no one actually cares about when there's radiation pouring down at everybody right now. Do everybody see that video of that guy in Banff who was taking those radiation readings in Banff, Canada? And they were off the fucking chart. Rainwater just coming outside of his truck. He's got one of those, I don't want to say the name wrong. That Russian Geiger counter that I can't remember the name of it right now. I almost want to order one, yeah. But he stopped outside of Banff in Canada, and he just took like a wet rag and put it outside the window and took some rain that was falling straight out of the sky, brought it back in the van and put his Geiger counter on it, and it was like at the level where it said like leave the area immediately.
It was right outside Lake Louise.
Lake Louise, yeah. So this is Canada. This is shit that affects us here. So that stuff. I mean, gee, I've been sick mildly twice in the last month. I haven't been sick for 8 years.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's reports about it being thousands of times higher, and I couldn't get access to any of the websites.
Yeah, there you go. So I mean, that's the other thing too. Is that's where I was led to. Where I was going to get on here and I was going to rant about some stuff. This is actually the real important stuff. Is the fact that we're letting these people walk all over the planet and seriously fuck shit up right now. I mean, walking into court and beating a traffic ticket, okay, that's the feel-good moment of the week, maybe, that kind of stuff. But we got to stop feeding these guys. We got to stop giving them money because they are killing us all. They are.
Is there a way to do group action along the lines of doing in UK where they like arrest the judge or no? Is that not the way?
Here's what you do. Okay, and this honestly, I think this is going to be the next revolution that like the Industrial Revolution, where people were throwing their tools into the cogs of the machines and their jackets and their bodies, if need be, to stop the machines to protest what was going on. Well, government only needs money to operate. They make money by you spending money. Period. So I think the next lessons we're going to do is I think I'm only going to start attacking some very specific things. And that's going to be number one, CRA. Because I promised them years ago that I would fuck with them until the day I die.
That's not good. Vindictive, though.
Yeah, not to be vindictive. So, hey. So I don't mind making good on that promise. So, yeah. You got to stop the money coming into the machine. That's the Canada Revenue Agency. And if they claim that they need this money because here's a good accounting scam for you. I took accounting in economics university. So if you really want to steal from people, you create a bank account where all the revenue of the country goes. So you only have revenue and then debt. So all the revenue goes into this one fund, and all the debt shows up over here. And then nobody ever really questions what those debts are, like for instance the trillions of dollars that are owed to the Bank of Canada, which is ultimately then owed to us, by the way. If that's a new concept for people.
Or even somebody taking out $1,000 credit on their credit card. They're creating money out of nothing.
Well, that's the same kind of thing, right? But so the government's spending all this money they're getting from the Bank of Canada that basically is ultimately owed to us. That's why our certificate, our particulars of live birth, is filed with the Bank of Canada. That's the security. Then the government can go on a spending spree, right? Well, if that debt is owed to us and there's interest on that debt, and that's all they're collecting money for, is to pay the interest on that debt, but we don't even know that that debt doesn't exist in the first place. Isn't that a good way to create some accounting fraud there? Well, look, we need all these revenues to pay off this debt that doesn't exist in the first place. So if they mash everything together as much as possible, it's really hard for people to track down where all the fraud's going on. But paying off debts that don't exist is one really good way to fuck people over. So the best thing to do then is just to cut off the money. Cut it off. I mean, what do you do to your kid when he's not mowing the lawn like he's supposed to? Well, you stop his allowance. It's pretty simple. That got done to me many a time when I was a kid. I learned my lesson on that one, okay? The other thing is, too, is your argument on that is the government says, well, you can't just do that. You know, when you're going to court against CRA, make some other arguments. I mean, I'm a contractor. If I built a house for somebody that wasn't up to expectation, do I get paid for that house? No. So if the government's argument is that we're paying for all these wonderful services the government is providing, then you send them an affidavit that says, you know what, your services are not up to par. I'm not getting out of this agreement what I was supposed to be getting, so fuck you. I'm not paying you. Yeah, when the services are up to par, and I'll let you know when that is, because I have yet to see the contract of what you're supposed to be providing me, but I just know I'm not happy in the first place, then we'll talk. So there's that argument. There's all sorts of arguments you can make all day long, but the whole thing is you got to cut off Revenue Canada, and then you got to cut off property taxes, because without those two things, people would be able to live in their home and not leave if they didn't have to, and just chill out and grow a garden. That was a concept I came up with like 5 years ago. I called it going super Gandhi on the government, right? Best way to protest the government is stay at home and grow a fucking garden. And then when they finally have to come onto your property with guns to remove you, who's the aggressor? Okay? That's all Gandhi did in India. Everyone sat down, and then when people had to basically come and put them in a chokehold to get them back to work, well, who just lost that war? You show who the aggressor is. Show who needs you. Hey, you need me. You just came onto my property to come here and to kill me until I could go back and perform for you people like a fucking trained monkey. You know? That's when you've got the upper hand. When they come onto your property to harm you. Especially for property taxes, you don't know. So that's the other one I'm going to be addressing is the property taxes. I know we've covered that in other episodes as well, where a very simple argument shut that whole thing down. So, that'll be there's a promise. Is those will be the next 2 episodes to come up. Is we'll do some detailed stuff on Canada Revenue Agency and property taxes, because everything after that is a moot point. Guess what? If they take your driver's license because you got too many speeding tickets and you didn't show up to court to pay or fight, that's the best fucking thing that ever could happen to you. Great. Here's your license back. Now fuck off. I'm going to drive without it. Woo! That's not fear. That's not terror, okay? They just did you a favor, actually. Good. Thank you. Thank you for revoking my license to perform a function of government. I guess I won't do that anymore.
Maybe you could assign some homework.
Homework? Yeah, here's some homework. Read. I just gave everybody about 5 different things they could read. I didn't even bring up this one. This is the Canadian Bill of Rights. And again, the only reason I don't like bringing up acts is because they're acts. They don't technically apply to us. But there is benefits from reading things like the Canadian Bill of Rights, because it tells you what government cannot do to you. Those are valuable things to know. So you got the Canadian Bill of Rights, 1960. I think that was Diefenbaker. Great piece of legislation. Apparently the government felt the need to redo it in the Canadian Constitution because even the government realized, oh, this blatantly only applies to government. The government knew that this only applies to government, and they were a little bit too blatant about it. So you can thank Diefenbaker for that, even though I promised way back in the day that I was going to find Diefenbaker's grave and thank him for the Avro Arrow project. But he's redeemed himself with the Bill of Rights, so it's okay, I forgive you. Start with that one. Read the Constitution Act and read the whole thing. Don't stop with just the Charter and Rights and Freedoms. Read the whole thing. The Charter and Rights and Freedoms stops at 32. And 32 is the one that tells you, and I read this earlier already, I got it highlighted in here. Right, I keep these all for quick reference for myself. So it tells you who the Charter applies to. And obviously a lot of people can make, people send me arguments all the time, oh, well that doesn't mean it doesn't apply to you. Well, I think it does. And anybody that understands English does. And if somebody out there reads this and that's not what they understand from reading that, then I don't care. Get back to work because you got a lot of fucking debt to pay off. Okay? Enjoy. Because I don't care and I don't want to hear your argument to the contrary. Maxims of law. Wherever you can find them, read them. Bouvier's has great ones. Even Black's Law Dictionary has great maxims of law. The original Latin, I would love to learn to speak Latin. I might not be capable of it by now. My brain's probably so entrenched in English. I know. And read them. Bouvier's is great. Black's Law, whatever. Just download the maxims and read them. Print them up. Highlight the ones you like. And start putting those into your documents. When I file a commercial claim against the government, I have one whole legal page. My cover page is nothing but legal maxims. These are the laws that govern me and my contracts. One whole page of the ones that I went through and I liked and just went, oh, okay. Added to all my documents. So this is not rocket science. Everybody can read a 15-page document. I don't even know where I got this one. All it is 15 pages where it lists all sorts of different maxims of law, right? Go in and, again, go to Bouvier's Law Dictionary, read them, print them, do whatever you want, read them. They're easy to understand because maxims of law, I mean, one of the maxims of law, period, is that laws have to be short and concise to the point. The shorter, the better, the more profound, the more force and effect it has. We covered that in one of the previous lessons, right? The shorter a sentence is, the more rock solid it is, the less that there is open to interpretation. That was the one where I talked about I am. There's not much left for interpretation there, right? You can expand on that, but that leaves pretty much everything. That could apply to, I won't get into that.
How many maxims do you have listed there?
Oh, geez. I don't even think they're numbered. There's got to be at least 100, 150. There's a lot of maxims of law. And again, all maxims of law are self-evident facts, period. They're just self-evident. They're so well-established principles that you don't even need to write them down. They don't need to be in law books, even though they are. Obviously, they're right there. So, they're like all sorts of little gems, okay? Expressions and words. I mean, the meaning of words is the spirit of the law. Somebody actually brought that up with me the other day. They're like, oh, what about the context of words and laws? So, well, absolutely that applies. That's why, well, here's another beauty. That leads me to something else before we even finish that thought. If a law, quotation marks, a statute, whatever you want to call it, an act, if it does not have a preamble, then it's not a real act or law or anything.
What do you mean by preamble?
A preamble is the blurb above it that says what the meaning or intent of everything to follow is about. What is the meaning? Why was this law even made? It has to have a meaning. There has to be a reason why the law was even made.
And if that's not there?
If there isn't one, then there's no... How could there be a law without a meaning or intent behind it?
Yeah, intent is everything.
Intent is everything in law. Period.
In the Chiropractic Act, the definition, the preamble, there was no preamble in what I read today.
Yeah.
There was just definitions and then a long-winded, which really surprised me actually when I actually read the thing.
Yeah.
It's 97% regulation of like what happens if you're a chiropractor who gets out of line.
Yeah, because it's just basically, yeah.
But there's no philosophy of the profession. There's no spirituality. There's none of these things there.
So somebody had a complaint against you. How could you possibly dissect a part of that law, the chiropractic law? I guess that didn't show up on camera. Joe was talking about his chiropractor's license, the chiropractor. Sorry, maybe I should. And that can be edited out. Citizen Kane brought up the question about the chiropractic whatever act or something. Okay, so if a complaint was made against an individual based on that act, and you had to go and address the part of the complaint, and you had to say, well, we have to see what the spirit of this act was in the first place. What was the meaning behind it to see if this was actually violated? Because the intent of what I did, and your intent and everything, if there is no intent to the law, you cannot dissect it. There's no way to possibly make a judgment on your actions. So if there's no preamble, it has no force and effect at all.
Income Tax Act has no preamble.
Of course it doesn't.
Where are you getting that? I mean, I totally appreciate what you just said.
Yeah, there's an actual source for that.
Yeah, did you figure that out over time, or did you
I figured that out over time, and there actually is a source for that.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I read that.
And man, if I could recall all that information on command, yeah, it's like a friend of mine who told me one time that they said, and I know who that is, and he knows who it is. And he used to tell me, yeah, he goes, you know, when you go to court and they tell you to swear on the Bible and to give the whole truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And his response to that was, if I could do that, I'd be in that book, not swearing on it. Right? It's another one of those. So that was one of my favorite ones I've heard recently. Okay, so another one is the Interpretation Act. And I brought that up in other lectures, whatever you want to call it, about how actually, if you want to call this a preamble to some Canadian laws, you could almost take it that way, because they call this the Interpretation Act. This is how to interpret some of their laws. So that's kind of along the lines of intent. And the Interpretation Act is where they redefine terms. So common English terms that we think mean one thing mean something a little bit different according to this Interpretation Act, right? So it's like their own little dictionary in some of the definitions. So whatever word you read in an act will sometimes be redefined in this. If not, then you go to a Canadian law dictionary. That used to be the basis for all our arguments until we realized I just don't give a shit about any of their acts at all, because I have to contract with an act to have any force or effect over me, right? We all have a driver's license, and based on that license, they charge us under the Highway Traffic Act. The license binds you to that. Every application you make is going to be to apply for an act of government that they're going to then claim grants them jurisdiction over you. Okay, so that's the Interpretation Act. Read that. The other big one is the Canada Evidence Act. What is evidence? Might come in handy if you're going to court. Call me crazy. I think that's it. Other than that, I've just got another copy of the Constitution Act here. And then Section 52. I think 52 is a big one, personally, because where it says that this is the supreme law of Canada, this is it. This is the supreme law. And if anything's inconsistent with this, it has no force and effect whatsoever. And this, it starts off, the start of the Constitution Act, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, basically tells you what government can't do to you. And then 52 says it's the supreme law. And if they do something that they're not allowed to do based on the first part of this act, it has no force and effect. Well, that's pretty much every act that's not in the Constitution Act. That's why nothing can have any force or effect, because almost everything they do violates your human rights in some form or fashion. I think extorting money out of you to pay a debt that's owed to you is pretty much a violation of your human rights. And I think that voids the Canada Revenue Agency Act or the Income Tax Act. Right there, just that one argument voids the entire act. They cannot extort money out of you to pay a debt to you. And then all you have to do is establish that the debts that Canada owes is owed to us. So, simple arguments. Simple, 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 simple. So that's all I got for that. That's reading material. Other reading material, like I've told people, and sometimes I just like to chase down definitions in Black's Law Dictionary. I find that fun. Most people won't for some, I guess, maybe. Maybe I need to get out more, I don't know.
Where do you get your Black's Law Dictionary?
I get it from my shelf right there where it says Black's Law Dictionary 5th edition.
For giggles, I went to the Winnipeg Public Library about 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And I requested several copies, and they're still on.
Yeah.
And there's only one that they let out, and it's a 1998 edition.
Yeah.
And all the other ones can only be looked at in-house if they're there.
Yeah, go to Lysecki Books on
what's it?
Osborne. Yeah, it's already Osborne there. Go to Lysecki Books, put your name in there when they get a copy in. I don't care if it's at edition 1 through 9. So they like to change definitions. People think there's a big conspiracy with the changing of the definitions. I don't really think that there is. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Just as a note, when I worked at the airport, we had to know that
Speak up, so
the Aeronautics Act.
Okay.
And the way we understood it was that the Aeronautics Act supersedes all acts.
Well, Section 52 of this pretty much disproves that. It says that this is the supreme law of Canada, period. Unless somewhere in the Aeronautics Act it actually says this supersedes the Constitution Act, then and it's great that somebody told you that.
The reason why it was said is because
it's such a vital piece of infrastructure.
Well, if you read on NASA or the U.S. Navy on how they do their acts,
yeah,
anything that comes over Canada is the Aeronautics Act and lands in Canada.
Okay.
So,
do we care about that?
Well,
I don't. They can write any piece of. They can write anything.
But it's just an interesting.
It's an interesting question, though. Like,
it is.
You have law of the land and law of the sea. Maybe what you're alluding to there.
Land, law of the air, sometimes.
Yeah, is there a law of the space?
Yeah.
That's what kind of got me when I was doing my job. Just when I looked at my criteria,
yeah,
what I was, the job I was performing.
Yeah, I could see national airspace being something very important, especially for government. So maybe government considers it to be, one of their prime acts, I guess. I don't know, the Aeronautics Act, because obviously they want to have control of their airspace. They don't want the Chinese or the Russians, flying whatever over our.
Just check and see.
Only the Americans.
Read it.
Yeah.
Just read it and see, and check it out and see.
I might, or somebody else could read it, and just give me a Cole's Notes version of it.
Okay.
So I like that idea even better. You read it, and you tell me what part of that act you think actually verifies the claim that was made, in case everybody didn't hear it, that Canada, or maybe the airport authority, claims that the Aeronautics Act supersedes all other acts in Canada.
Well, aren't airports not technically part of the Canada?
I don't know.
Because I know, if you land in in Canada or in Germany or wherever,
it's still international.
You're not actually
until you cross the
in
border
the country, so it might actually have a higher stance. Just because
see, this is actually a very valid sovereign point, because when you consider the fact that, say, the Chinese embassy or the American embassy in Canada is not Canadian soil, it's actually American soil.
When I worked with customs, when a plane landed and people were leaving the plane to come through customs, if there was an issue, you were not allowed to enter Canada, or if you were held in a cell.
It's a port of entry.
That's right, redirected.
Yeah, it's still international. It's still international area.
Because I used to tell people, you see that yellow line, they're going, yeah. I says, well, this is the United States. That's Canada.
That should tell you right there that Canada isn't really a landmass of any kind. It's just jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That yellow line was literally, this is actually very valid for freeman kind of stuff, because I try to make this point with people all the time, and that's actually helping improve it. A yellow line at the airport is one's international and the next is Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, that's perfect. That's brilliant. That proves right there that Canada's not really a landmass.
I used to tell people, I said, look, if you're going to cross this line, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you have to do. You cross this line, you're in the United States, I'm going to search you, and then you're going to go, I'm going to escort you to Canada Customs, you're going to come back through there. Do you want to do that?
Canada only has authority over Canadian business in its sales territory, and an international airport is outside of its jurisdiction. That's why there's a yellow line. This is where Canada kind of ends.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a landmass, it's a jurisdiction for a purpose, for Canadian government functions, period. I mean, this should all be just helping consolidate things in people's brains. The same way that technically my house, when I'm a sovereign, my house and my property where my fence ends, well, that's not Canadian soil either. That's my own. Period. They got no jurisdiction over me and they walk onto my property. Then we can get into other things. Oh, you don't have a land patent. You don't have this. You don't have everything else. It's like, look.
Presumes the Crown's jurisdiction.
I didn't apply for a land patent. Well, who do I apply to a land patent for?
What is applying?
Does God have a fucking patent office? No. And unless the government of Canada is going to show me the bill of sale where they bought the land off the creator, I'm not going to accept their land patent. How about I just print my own? My own law. Isn't that what Canada does? They print their own laws for their own soil, so I'll just print my own.
Well, that raises an intriguing question. The Canadian Constitution, that Constitution Act, which to me sounds like an oxymoronic title, that's the supreme act in the Canadian jurisdiction. of course, the British Queen gets it from the Indians, from the natives, the indigenous, and of course, when they did that, they made them sign these false treaties, right? So these treaty documents are what these sovereigns are arguing.
Yeah,
right?
and so those treaties aren't even in place.
Right, and they're not being honored, etc.
So is
But
it
the treaty document with that, I mean, I'm just thinking this out loud, troubleshooting this, with the treaty document then should be superior to the Canadian.
Yeah. So there's another valid argument. It's almost like the Nui Core argument, where instead of us contacting the government and saying, hey, I'm claiming that you guys don't have the authority to issue a land patent because that authority came from your Constitution Act, which goes back to the Queen of England, which goes back to her treaties with the Indians, and blah, 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 blah. Instead of claiming that, well, what would be the smartest way to do that instead? Yeah, I'm claiming you have no authority, and if you do have the authority through these treaties and everything else, I'd be more than happy to see your argument. Other than that, I'm simply declaring that this little chunk of land right here is mine. I don't need your sovereign authority to grant me permission to my little chunk of land. All I need is my own sovereign authority to declare it. Period. And then the minute you go and you get a notary public to stamp that, that is already public recognition of your document. Send that into the government. I own this little parcel of land. GPS coordinates, this, it's in a square enclosure, the enclosure rules in Black's Law Dictionary. That's mine. If you're claiming otherwise, you've got 21 days to get back to me. Right? And unless you've got anything short of a bill of sale from the creator, I'm not accepting your claim. Because I live on it. Now, here's a photo of me in my house. It's mine. There's all sorts of arguments you can make. So people just need to start doing this shit. Start thinking. I'm not applying with anybody for anything. I'll make declarations about things.
Well, you don't want anyone to confuse you to be more.
Oh, I got this really wonderful document that I haven't done anything with yet that was going to go after the Queen. I started developing about a year ago, and it's actually like on 14 by 21 inch paper. I had it printed at the UPS store, and it's actually like a declaration, and it's got all these points in it. It's really nice. I still got some work to it. There's a reason I was going to send it off, but it was more so just for shits and giggles. But it's a declaration, right? Sovereigns, freemen make declarations. We don't apply for things.
You don't petition.
It's like when people ask, well, how do I get to be a freeman? I say, oh, okay, well, there's this office downtown in Ottawa. You write to them and you fill out this little application for freeman status. No! No! Right? It's like every time I used to love this about Shroud seminars. I went to 2 of them, and people go there and be like, oh, I did what you said, and I sent this off, and they just completely ignored it, and what do I do now? And you say, oh, well, you call this number. Turn around the whiteboard and he goes, all you do when somebody doesn't obey one of your orders is you phone this, and you start writing 1-800, and then you write cry baby. And all these people have their pens out, and they start writing this phone number down, and then you get to the crybaby part, they're just like, you fucker, you got me, That's it, that's it. People just want to whine about things. If somebody's not obeying you, or they're not, you got a commercial lien, and no one's, and it's not going anywhere, it's because you haven't initiated anything with it. You haven't gone and done something yet to go and collect on that as a sovereign, because as a sovereign, you can go to an international banker, and you can do the same things the government does, period. Why? Because we're the ones that created this entire system. Period. We are the top rung. We created it all. So we can do anything any of these other guys can do. Period. And failing that, go home and plant a garden. And just go super gone. So we gotta start taking the money away from these people, because I'm telling you, I'm not happy with the services I'm getting. I like the hospitals. I've required stitches a few times. I don't want medication of any kind ever. That's my own personal thing. I will never go on any kind of medication at all. I don't want that kind of help from Health Canada. I don't mind operations when one's needed. Like, life-saving stuff, that kind of shit. I don't mind paying for those services. But pretty much everything else, go fuck yourself. I'll take care of myself. Thank you very much.
Fluoride.
And a little caveat to that, we're heading up the fluoride argument here in Winnipeg to get the fluoride out of the water. You know all about that. You know it's toxic. Vancouver never put it in, etc. But just for the record, the Canadian Medical Association,
No fluoride in my water.
their own epidemiology studies say that the healthcare system, is killing approximately almost 1 million people a year.
That's the whole intent of it.
Yeah, exactly right.
It doesn't say.
I'm not an advocate of the medical
It doesn't say
system.
Good Health Canada.
Health Canada.
You know, you get those little PC Health bars on your computer where it says PC Health, and it's got like one red line at the very bottom. You're like, oh fuck, my computer's not looking too good.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Health Canada is.
For sure.
It doesn't say their mandate is to make sure our health is good. It just addresses the health of Canadians, and I think that their mandate is to make sure that we're as unfucking healthy and dying as possible. When they change it to Good Health Canada, then that's a promise that I'm going to want to cash in on. Until then, I'll look after my own health. So, yeah. Any other points? Yeah.
On that topic, fluoride, the point was to try to get it out of the system.
Yeah.
You mean
How would we pressure the politicians to get rid of it?
like do a class action
Be
lawsuit?
like a private side, civil?
Can you write acts?
Those are big battles.
Can we get up a declaration?
One that is,
You probably have to start like doing the whole raising awareness thing and this and that and convincing. Here's my problem with that is I'm not a big fan of trying to convince the masses of anything. It seems ironic because apparently I'm trying to convince a number of people now. Wasn't my intention, by the way. Yeah, in your own locality, short of just, well, you know what, I know. Would I bother petitioning the tobacco companies to take mercury out of their cigarettes so when I smoke them they're better for me? Probably not. I mean, even though water is an essential service, ultimately you can go spend $5 and buy a 20-gallon jug of water for yourself to drink.
Should you have to spend that $5 if it's available out of the tap?
I know that. I know.
Let me clarify something.
Yeah, you got to raise awareness.
That water has fluoride in it.
It probably does because it's
very
gotten into the system and
hydrofluorosilic acid is very difficult to get out, and it's
Yeah.
very specific filter systems to take it out in the bottled water that you buy in the
That's
store,
true.
or that still has it in. But I think
It
Claudia
is
was asking
fair.
the question, and I hear you. And by the way, public awareness on the fluoride issue is exploding.
That's good, yeah.
We've got 2 websites up actually for Winnipeg to get it out. But I think, because Claudia and I talked about this before, this is a good question to ask.
Yep.
You got to ask. Have you been involved in any class action lawsuits? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not so much an individual's case, but say something for the general public. Like fluoride. Like, say, what could we do? or how would you go about
the
that?
thing is, if you had the for a class action lawsuit, the only way that I think that it could be relevant or have standing would be that if you have the outline of your lawsuit, because remember every claim has got 3 parts. It's got the statement of facts, damages based on those statements, and then the remedy demanded for the damage. So if your lawsuit has those 3 components together, and every single person you're claiming to represent has read that and signed as a party to it, then I would say yes, you can probably take that into court and fight to win that.
And we're pretty much right there right now. We've got witnesses. It's technically medication. It's technically a toxin. I think
Yeah, they're medicating the water supply, which
Yeah.
is so completely criminal. It's
Yeah, to
sickening.
qualify as a class action lawsuit, it's like how many signatures? Like 20
I
or
don't know, but I was kind of thinking just to keep it simple,
Yeah.
just one person filing something and prove to us that this is safe.
Yeah, see, I don't know much about this. I would.
And if you can't prove to us that this is safe, you have an obligation to take it
Calgary
out.
did
Well, they'll prove to you it's safe.
Calgary did one if there was one that said it was unsafe.
They got 1,000 doctors on their payroll that'll sign tomorrow
Yeah,
saying
well,
that fluoride is just wonderful for your teeth.
Actually, no.
That's
Usually
true.
it's dentists, especially
Yeah.
like if you listen to the radio or any of the things where they're yammering from. They always contact dentists and ask them,
Well, you know,
"How is the fluoride?"
that's, I mean, what relevancy does a dentist have to do with something I'm drinking that's going into my body?
It's going to wind
That's
up
true.
staying
You're going to have
cold.
the expert witnesses come forward and make that statement. And for the
Yeah.
record, we have experts right now. There are doctors in the city on one of them.
How about we
and
don't-
there's internationals who will come forward as expert witnesses. But I think Claudia's point's very good. To keep it simple,
We don't
like,
want it.
What about the damage to individual people?
I don't doubt. How about I think it's damaging. I don't think it's good. If people want fluoride, then provide them with little pills they can take home.
Which they used to do.
Which they used to do, yeah. I remember those red pills they used to give us in school and say, we always used to chew them and our teeth would all get red and we're like, laugh at each other. That's terrifying now that I think about it.
What was that?
That was fluoride.
Yeah, that was pure fluoride, yeah.
Outside of
But how about we just don't want something? I don't care if it's good or bad. I don't want it. We have the right to refuse things that even are beneficial for us.
Yes.
If people want it, take it out of something, give it to them in a form that is not just being produced to people on mass scale like water that most people are dependent on. I just don't want it. Sure, bring 1,000 of your doctors forward that say it is good for me and everything else, you know what, that's fine and dandy. I still don't want it. When I was a kid, I was told broccoli was really fucking good for me. And I better eat it. But I didn't want it. I don't care if it's good for me, I don't want it.
The fluoride debate or question is interesting though, because if you do go to court with it, like for example, all the big companies right now are changing their public PR campaigns because they're removing fluoride from it because they know that something's brewing. Yeah. And the dentists are ganging. A lot of the dentists are coming to the fore and they're publicly saying this is bad. So you look at it this way. Say, take your average dentist out there in North America who's already intentionally given fluoride to umpteen patients that have passed, right? Well, that doctor is then liable, like individual doctor, the contract they had with that patient.
Yeah.
Like that's a time bomb. It's
that's individual lawsuits.
Yes.
Which brings up the other question. Would it be better to do 5,000 individual lawsuits for the fluoride issue, or just one class action lawsuit?
5,000 would be much more difficult for them to deal with. I like the idea of 5,000 separate lawsuits.
Because the class action lawsuit generally only benefits the lawyer.
Not only that, the class action lawsuit, judges actually have the discretion to say, no.
Yeah, good luck with 5,000 of those.
Right, and there was actually just something like that happened actually. The judge threw out that Walmart class action lawsuit where something like what 1.8 million people were suing Walmart for something. The judge just went, no, I really don't believe these people all have a common grievance with Walmart.
Probably led by a lawyer who is...
Because you can make that argument, common grievance, right?
That's right. That was for a women's rights issue for Walmart employees. That 10 women took it to the Supreme Court and they lost because the courts are crooked, because those judges are crooked.
Of course,
so you're not going to get a fair
So if nothing else, the individual lawsuits, it's like the same thing they've done to us for years now, is waste our time. Well, 5,000 individual lawsuits takes up a lot of their resources as well. Great, do it. And here's another argument I'd love to see people start making when they go down to the courthouse and they start to file these lawsuits, and I've told a few people about this, is when they try to charge you the $240 to file a lawsuit. Yeah, number one, you say, well, excuse me, is there something I can sign to sign up for a program to have that waived? Because I'm sorry, I don't have any money. And it's my understanding this is a publicly funded courthouse. So if this is publicly funded, then I shouldn't have to pay for this. And if I can't afford it, are you denying me access to justice because I'm poor?
Did you do that?
I haven't done that yet. I haven't had a need to do that. But do it. I'm poor. Are you denying me access to justice? Isn't that the reason it's supposed to be publicly funded? Is so even the poor have a right to justice? Well, now you don't have a $240 fee anymore either. So now we're not wasting our money going after these fuckers anymore. And that's one of the keys. So I hope you like that, my thoughts on that.
Yeah, very much.
That's all they are.
It does, because it helps to clarify, because we've been searching for different strategies.
I wouldn't do the class action suit. I just don't. I think that it leaves too many holes. That they can just say, well, I really don't believe you guys' grievance is common, or I don't think that some of the people on this actually understood what was in this lawsuit. Just because you read it doesn't mean you understand it. If you don't understand it, then you have no claim. It's like just sign this and you can get some. Read this, say you understood it, and you'll get some money out of this lawsuit at the end, right? That's one of the holes that brings into a class action lawsuit. You were going to ask something.
Another course of action we're contemplating was sending in a motion and sending a copy of that motion to the insurance carrier.
A motion of
that like that we're going to file a lawsuit against the city or for the
Don't
Florida
send them a notice,
Or
a
a
legal
notice,
notice. Yeah.
and send a copy of that notice to the insurance carrier that insures the city's water system.
Yeah, send them a notice of damage. You people have been poisoning me my entire life.
And the reason for that
You
would
stunted
be,
my IQ. Look at me. Look at the way I'm talking. That's proof.
Like that's not a bad joke.
Seriously.
Anyways, go ahead. Why don't you finish up?
would have been for the insurance company not to insure them in the future. Hey, we feel there's going to be a liability in the future if you don't do what these people are telling you to do.
That's probably not going to scare them. Insurance companies don't care. Right?
You know, the best way to go into one of those lawsuits is to do it yourself and represent yourself. I was in 3 of them.
Of course.
Hundreds of millions. I got nothing. The
Yeah.
lawyers got millions of dollars.
Of course you have to represent yourself. If you subrogate, if you subrogate your rights to somebody else to enforce, then you no longer have any rights.
I wish I would do that.
And I'd love to meet the lawyer that can do a better job of defending my rights than me. So, I don't know, we probably don't even need to tape anything more tonight, so
No.
that was my promise though, that we get on here real quick then though, is that, well, that's what we're going to concentrate on, I think, maybe next time. We'll give our battle plans away here to my adversaries to come and shoot me before we film the videos. So we're gonna teach people how to not file income taxes anymore, not pay them, or to get them back if they had paid them. No promises, just what you can do about it. You're only going to collect or make things work on your ability or your resolve to see it through. And if you're not willing to, then just pay them. And property taxes. That's two big ones.
But because New Zealand is 6